Marceline Stone recognized the bird the first time she noticed it perched atop the tallest skyscraper in the city. It was no mere crow. Its feathers sparkled a deep obsidian hue, as if flecked with storm clouds. Far too large to be an ordinary creature. Even at a distance, its presence crackled with air-charged energy, raising the hairs on her arms despite the stifling summer heat. She had read about the legendary storm crow in obscure tomes from the Library of Arcane Studies, but nothing prepared her for the electrifying reality of seeing it in person. Some called it an omen of dread. Others believed it to be an avenging sentinel. No matter what name they gave it, its reputation was fearsome. Those who dared to break any magical taboo in the city became subject to raging storms that bore the crow's mark. Passing through busy intersections, Marceline could sense the city's undercurrent of anxiety. It wasn't the usual tension of urban life, commuters stressed about work, merchants fretting over sales, but something deeper. A palpable dread that emanated from everyone who had even the slightest brush with city magic. The presence of the storm crow was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a living threat that hovered day and night above the glass spires. Whenever the glimmering creature took wing, the sky turned ominous and citizens scrambled for shelter. More often than not, the crow returned to its roost without releasing a drop of rain, saving its fury for those who transgressed the city's ancient laws. It was as if the city itself were testing its inhabitants' commitment to mystical codes of conduct. Marceline was no stranger to magic, though she practiced hers discreetly. One didn't survive in a metropolis bristling with hidden enchantments without picking up a few protective charms. Years ago, when she was still a newbie archivist at the Arcane Institute, she had stumbled upon a half-forgotten ledger referencing a centuries-old pact. The city's forebears had invoked spirits to protect them in times of dire need. Among those protective spirits, the storm crow was said to be the most feared. The ledger hinted at how the crow was bound to the city's highest places by a cunning ritual. But the details of that ritual were conspicuously missing. Whether old librarians had purposely omitted them, or they had been lost to time, no one knew. Keeping her head down, Marceline wove through the midday crowd. She was plugged into the city's rumour mill, especially within the magical underground. 3 weeks prior, an unscrupulous apprentice had tried forging glamours from dawn to dusk without paying respects to the city's gatekeepers. The next evening, a vicious, unrelenting storm battered his workshop, collapsing its roof. He survived, but lost his magical apparatuses, and the crow was seen swooping through the tempest, lightning sparking off the tips of its wings. After that, nobody with any sense dared question the crow's might. Despite these cautionary tales, trouble was still brewing. An old friend of Marceline's, Reynard, had gone missing after bragging about discovering a secret that would unbind the crow forever. Her search for Reynard began in the labyrinthine side streets where contraband spells were sold behind unmarked doors. Marceline found old wards carved into the bricks of certain buildings, wards that flickered faintly with leftover conjuration. Somebody had been weaving illusions to cloak their activities. She suspected these illusions were meant to hide a black market dealing in forbidden relics, knowledge that let one skirt magical taboos. The deeper she delved, the more she felt eyes on her, as though a presence followed her through shadowy stoops. Sometimes she glimpsed the silhouette of the storm crow, perched on a distant rooftop, its obsidian feathers glistening under neon lights. In one dimly lit alcove, she stumbled upon a graffiti of the storm crow. Spray paint in swirling silver and midnight blue displayed the bird with wings outstretched, lightning crackling from its beak. Below it, a cryptic script in an archaic language spelled out, "Surrender or be judged." Marceline ran her fingertips over the painted sigils. They glowed faintly, indicating that whoever had left this message invoked genuine arcane power. This was no simple street art. It was a coded warning. She jotted down the symbols in her notebook, hoping that they might help unravel Reynard's disappearance. Continuing her investigation, she headed toward the dilapidated district known colloquially as Broken Corner. It was a place where half-constructed buildings and half-buried wards coexisted in a tangle of twisted metal and cracked concrete. And the heart of the district loomed an old skyscraper that had never been completed. Rusted scaffolding framed empty floors of exposed rebar and shattered windows. An eerie skeleton of what was meant to be a grand architectural landmark. An aura of unsettled magic clung to every surface. Scattered test wards in the corners hinted that the place might have been used for clandestine experiments in conjuration many years ago. Marceline cautiously ascended a shaky flight of metal stairs. She was sure she detected the faint pulse of a living presence, but no sign of life was immediately apparent. She reached the 10th floor, an area strewn with broken desks, chairs, and old cables. A swirl of dust danced in the musty air. Then she heard it. A raspy breathing behind a large broken window. She approached slowly, conjuring a small orb of light in her palm, revealing a figure hunched over in the semi-darkness. It was Rayma, an ex-occultist Marceline had befriended long ago. Rayma's once astute eyes were now dull, and she looked malnourished, as though she had been hiding here for days. "They're searching," Rayma whispered. "Anyone who tries to find the crow's secret is being watched." "Where's Reynard?" Marceline asked, keeping her voice gentle. Rima shook her head, eyes darting toward the broken window. Rose chasing that ritual to unbind the crow. He thought he could break the vow protecting the city. He believed it was the reason our magical powers were stunted. But he didn't know who else was after it. With trembling hands, she passed Marceline a folded parchment. It's part of the puzzle. I need you to be careful." Marceline unfurled the parchment. More cryptic runes, many of which resembled the tags she had seen on the graffiti. Streaked across the center was a sketch of the storm crow, wings wide as if caught mid-scream. On the edge was a crest she recognized as belonging to a powerful local family rumored to have ties to ancient city magic. She thanked Rima for the clue and offered to help her find better shelter, but the woman refused to leave, insisting she was safer in the half-finished building where few ventured. With a final warning that mysterious forces were at work, Rima disappeared into the gloom. Back on the street, Marceline couldn't shake the sensation of being observed. The late afternoon sky had grown thick with clouds, and the wind picked up in sudden gusts. She took a route down an alley flanked by looming brick walls. The moment she emerged onto a main street, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind her. She turned, but saw no one. Instinct told her a subtle invisibility glamour might be in play. Whispering a dispelling charm, she flicked her wrist, and a surge of magic pulsed through the air. Instantly, two figures appeared, each cloaked in dark fabrics embroidered with faint glimmers of runes, their faces gaunt and unsmiling. "Hand over the parchment," one of them rasped, voice tinged with arcane distortion. "It doesn't belong to you." Marceline gripped her satchel tight. "I don't know who you are, but this parchment holds the key to saving a missing friend," the second figure hissed. "You meddle in matters that predate your bloodline. The crow's contract will not be dissolved by insolent mortals. Give us the scroll or face the crow's wrath." Overhead, thunder rumbled. Marceline glanced up to see the silhouette of the storm crow perched on a narrower skyscraper. The bird's gaze, if one could call it that, was turned in their direction. Its eyes glowed in eerie silver, as though it recognized a breach in progress. The tension in Marceline's chest tightened. These cloaked enforcers, or whoever they were, had no qualms about using the crow's threat to intimidate her. But she couldn't just give up. She whispered a protective incantation under her breath. The first cloaked figure lunged, a blade of crackling energy forming in his hand. Marceline sidestepped, raising her palm, and sent a pulse of shimmering force that pushed him back. Second figure hurled a dart of black flame. She ducked, narrowly avoiding the searing conjuration as it scorched the pavement. Lightning flashed overhead, and for a heartbeat the storm crow's call pierced the air, an unearthly cry that shook glass windows up and down the street. Horns blared as cars skidded to avoid the sudden swirl of gale winds. Pedestrians scattered, shouting. The crow took flight, its massive wings flapping with resounding thunderclaps. The skies dimmed even more, a swirling funnel of black clouds forming overhead. Marceline realized the crow was agitated, called to unleash its wrath in response to this arcane skirmish. She had to end the conflict quickly or risk harming innocent bystanders. She flung another kinetic wave at the cloaked aggressors. It smacked them against a lamppost, briefly stunning one. The other roared in anger and conjured a bolt of electrified energy from the raging storm above. Marceline braced herself, but the storm crow intervened first, diving so sharply that the torrent of summoned lightning reversed course. It slammed into the conjurer instead, knocking him off his feet. The man spasmed, collapsing in a swirl of crackling sparks. His partner scrambled to his side, cursing. Realizing the crow was now actively punishing them, he grabbed the unconscious conjurer and tried to retreat. Marceline watched as they stumbled down an alley. She considered chasing them, but the booming thunder overhead warned her otherwise. Best to vanish before the crow decided she was a culprit too. In the safety of her cramped apartment, Marceline bolted the door and set a carefully crafted ward on the threshold. The lock flickered with a faint golden hue, an old trick she'd perfected years ago. She spread Rima's parchment on her desk, cross-referencing the runes with the tagged graffiti notes in her notebook. Rima mentioned a secret to unbind the crow. Why would anyone want to break the vow that protected the city, unless they believed it also suppressed certain freedoms? Reynard had always been ambitious about pushing his magical limits. Perhaps he thought releasing the binding would remove a cap on his power. Sitting at her desk, Marceline deciphered piece by piece. The crest along the edge of Rima's parchment belonged to House Blackthorn, an influential family with arcane roots that stretched back generations. Legends claimed they had negotiated the original pact with the crow. If that was true, then any clue to breaking the vow might also lie in their dusty archives. She recalled that House Blackthorn's ancestral home had been converted into a historical landmark, now closed to the public. Gaining entry would require both stealth and cunning. Late that night, she made her way to the enormous Blackthorn estate, which loomed on the outskirts of the city like a fortress of old stone and gargoyles. The gates were locked, but Marceline knew the wards were likely more of a challenge. She circled a side wall until she found a rusted iron gate in a shadowy corner. Whispering an unlocking enchantment taught to her during her archivist days, she felt the barrier tremble, then relent. Slipping inside, she moved across an overgrown garden spotted with statues whose features had eroded into steady, watchful gazes. A single light shone from the tower window, too faint to be electric. The rest of the mansion was dark, aside from occasional flashes of lightning that came from the storm crow gliding overhead. Without question, the crow had noticed her intrusion, but perhaps it didn't deem her a violator yet. She quickened her pace, pressing herself against the cold stone walls as she searched for a discreet entrance. A small servant's door near the eastern wing revealed itself, and she slipped into the musty corridors without triggering any obvious alarm. Marceline followed her intuition, letting the faint, arcane echoes guide her to an aging library blocked off by wooden planks. She pried them loose with a crowbar she'd brought, wincing at the screech of nails. Inside, dust motes veiled everything. Row upon row of shelves loaded with ancient tomes, she scanned the spines for anything referencing the pact or the storm crow specifically. Hours slipped by, and the only sounds were her own breathing and distant thunder. At last she found a large leather-bound volume titled Oaths of the Founding Houses. Its final pages were sealed with wax. Summoning a precise bit of heat magic, she melted the seal carefully, revealing hidden text. The pact was described in archaic, looping script. The founders had conjured the crow to guard the city against a dark force that threatened to consume it. In exchange, the crow demanded unwavering adherence to the new magical laws. No forging of illusions meant to desecrate sacred spaces, no necromancy within city limits, and no attempts to disrupt the crow's abiding watch. If these were violated, the crow's storms would descend in full fury. A footnote revealed an even more disturbing detail. Unbinding the crow would unleash the original threat it suppressed. The lines read, "Should the crow be set free, so too will the shadows that once prowled these streets be unshackled." Marceline's heart lurched. Had Reynard realized that breaking the vow would free not only the city's magical restrictions, but also something sinister? The next page contained an unfinished incantation, scrawled in haste, describing a ritual to sever the crow's connection to the city. In the margins, a frantic hand had written, "This must never come to pass. The price is too high." Realizing the gravity of the situation, she carefully bookmarked the page and slipped out of the library. She couldn't let the notes fall into the wrong hands. Darkness pressed in on her as she moved through the mansion's corridor. Lightning flashed through a tall window, revealing the stormcrow perched on a gargoyle outside. Its massive shape blotted out the sky. The thunderous beat of its wings made the stained glass windows shiver. She sensed its scrutiny, as if it might smash through the glass at any moment. There was no doubt in her mind that the crow perceived her rummaging in these ancestral secrets. She had to get out quickly. She found a side exit and raced across the garden. Shadows danced between wild rose bushes, and low-hanging branches scraped her arms like bony fingers. Then a flash of light illuminated a figure standing by a broken statue of a robed woman. Marceline nearly cried out in shock. It was Reynard. His hair was disheveled, eyes sunken. He wore dark robes that glimmered with arcane insignias, and he clutched a runic staff. Shocked relief flooded Marceline, but that feeling faded when she noticed his tense posture and the mania shining in his eyes. "You're alive," she whispered, catching her breath. "We've all been looking for you. What happened?" He gave a grim, humorless laugh. "No one was supposed to find me this soon. Especially not you." "Reynard, please," she implored. "Something terrifying is bound with the crow. If you release it, you'll free that ancient evil." What if that evil is only a tale, spun by those who wanted to control our powers? Marceline, think about all the spells we could master if we weren't constrained by this archaic pact. The city belongs to us, not some monstrous bird perched on towers. Lightning arced overhead, dancing between swirling clouds. Far above, the crow let out a piercing caw. Reynard lifted his staff, muttering incantations. Marceline felt the air vibrate with a menacing energy. He was attempting the severance ritual. She realized with horror that he must have pieced together enough of the puzzle to attempt it here, in the heart of the Blackthorn estate. She recalled the cryptic runes Rima had given her, a portion of the unbinding script. If Reynard had managed to fill in the gaps, he might very well succeed. "No!" she shouted, dashing forward. She tried to knock the staff from his hands, but an invisible barrier threw her back. The cracks of thunder intensified, and swirling black clouds thickened over the estate. The crow descended to a lower parapet, letting out an enraged shriek. She glimpsed elongated shadows flickering beneath the crow's wings, shapes with grasping claws and jaws of swirling darkness. A cold dread rippled through her. This was more than a bird of storms. Its mere proximity to that old malevolence was stirring monstrous silhouettes back to life. Reynard continued chanting. The ground shook, and lightning struck a nearby gnarled tree, splitting it in half and igniting it in a shower of sparks. The crow swept down, unleashing a brutal gust of wind that nearly knocked Marceline flat. She clutched the seal in the volume she had uncovered, searching for a counter-ritual. Her mind raced with the lines from the old text. Fury raged around her. The crow's storms mingled with Reynard's conjured energies, swirling into a massive tempest that threatened to tear the estate apart. Summoning her courage, Marceline began a chant. She called upon the vow's original terms. "By the Founder's oath, by the crow's sentry, by the guarded wards that seal the city's ancient foes, remain bound." She recited the instructions from memory, weaving in her own knowledge of protective magic. She just needed to drown out Reynard's incantation, to intercept the final words that would break the pact. Lightning struck again, dangerously close, scalding the stone walkway. Reynard's eyes blazed with raw desperation. "We can be free, Marceline. You don't know what it's like to be caged by these archaic laws," she kept chanting, unwavering. "Better an intact city than one consumed by the horrors the crow keeps at bay. You're playing with forces you can't comprehend." A jagged blade of wind cut across her cheek, warm blood trickling down, yet she didn't stop. The storm crow soared overhead, funneling the raging storm. With a banshee-like cry, it dove between them, wings stretched wide. Marceline felt a surge of power as the crow latched on to her chant, reinforcing it with its own unearthly presence. The swirling darkness that began oozing into the garden recoiled as if burned by a bright light. Reynard struggled to maintain his flickering staff's glow, but the crow's wrath and Marceline's incantation drowned him out. With one final echo of thunder, Reynard's staff shattered. Splinters of enchanted wood flew, cutting across his palms, and he howled in pain. A vortex opened above them, siphoning away the malevolent shadows that threatened to spill forth. The crow let out a triumphant cry, beating its wings again, until the swirling gloom dissipated. Gale winds gradually died down, leaving the night consumed by the lingering echoes of thunder. Reynard collapsed onto his knees, tears running down his face. Whether from frustration, pain, or relief, Marceline couldn't tell. She approached cautiously, heart pounding, the heavy tome pressed to her chest. Overhead, the storm crow circled one final time. Then it returned to the spire of the old estate, the sky gradually clearing. Tiny slivers of moonlight peeked through ragged clouds. "You must have known," she murmured, touching Reynard's shoulder gently. "But even if you succeeded, it would come at a cost." He met her gaze, despair etched into his features. "They told me it was just a myth, that the darkness was an ancient ruse to keep us in line. I didn't realize." His voice trailed off amid the crackle of the dying storm. "I was so sure I could handle it." They both turned to look at the crow, watchful and silent above them. It appeared regal, though drained by its outpouring of power. Marceline knew the vow was intact, and the city's magical taboos remained in place. It was a fragile piece, but a necessary one. She wondered how many more would try to unseat the crow in pursuit of unbridled power. In the hush that followed the tumult, she and Reynard exchanged no more words. He was too shaken to argue, and she was too relieved to press him. By morning, the skies were crystal clear, as if the tempest had never happened. City dwellers went on with their daily bustle, some whispering about a late-night storm that rattled windows in the northern district. Most dismissed it as normal atmospheric chaos, unaware of the dangerous dance between vow and rebellion that had taken place. Marceline escorted Reynard to a friend's safe house, then departed before any officials came asking questions. Days passed without further storms. The legendary crow remained perched upon the tallest skyscraper, a dark silhouette against the gleaming sun. Its presence lingered over the city like a watchful guardian, ensuring that magical taboos remained unbroken. Although the crow struck fear in many hearts, Marceline couldn't help feeling a measure of gratitude. Despite its severity, the creature preserved a balance that allowed everyone, those gifted in magic and those ignorant of it, to coexist in relative harmony. She penned a private entry in her journal that evening, detailing the events, the Blackthorn estate, and the near catastrophe. She recorded the vow's specifics, vowing never to share them carelessly. Some truths, she realized, had to remain under lock and key to protect the city from its own hubris. Though it stung her sense of intellectual curiosity, she understood now that certain mysteries weren't meant to be solved. In the weeks that followed, those who trafficked in forbidden magic lay low, deterred by the crow's unrelenting vigilance. Rumors whispered of fledgling sorcerers who vanished after experimenting with spells beyond their skill. Perhaps they were punished by the crow's storms, or perhaps they realized the city's watchers were not to be trifled with. Marceline often looked up at the skyline, noticing how the crow's silhouette carved a stark figure against dawn or dusk, as though persistently reminding the world of its ancient authority. Renard kept to himself, grappling with shame and regret. Marceline visited him occasionally, half out of old friendship, half to ensure he wouldn't be tempted by dangerous pursuits. She never spoke about the unbinding ritual again, and he offered no new revelations. Yet, as they sipped tea in uncomfortable silence, she could see in his eyes a haunted remembrance of how close he'd come to unleashing a primal darkness. Life in the city resumed its frenetic pace. New construction projects rose rapidly, glass towers reflecting the horizon in shimmering angles. Billboards lit the night sky, drawing throngs of visitors from distant lands, many oblivious to the supernatural tensions swirling beneath the surface. Still, the crow stood sentinel, unwavering and patient, drawn to the highest pinnacles of steel and glass. Sometimes Marceline caught wind of its core riding the wind, echoing across rooftops. With every warning shriek, the city's hidden practitioners remembered to tread carefully. On a late summer afternoon, she ventured outside for a much-needed break, gazing at the silver-tinged clouds. Rain threatened, but it was the natural order of weather this time, not the crow's conjured fury. She inhaled deeply, letting the humid air saturate her lungs, her thoughts drifting to possibilities of a future in which the city's magic was more balanced, less fear-based. Perhaps one day a new pact might be forged that allowed for safer progress. But for now, the vow remained. And high above, bristling with arcane strength, the storm crow watched every street and alleyway, its wrath ever present for those who dared to break the ancient magical laws that bound them all. Marceline turned away from the skyline with a chill whispering through her. She had seen enough to know that the crow was both protector and judge. The city, with all its skyscrapers, neon lights, and hidden enchantments, existed at the whim of that majestic creature. And if the day ever came when mortal ambition drove someone to try unbinding the vow once more, the city would tremble beneath thunderous wings. But it would not face that trial without warning. The storm crow's cry would echo again, a harsh dirge for any who chose to challenge its vigilant watch. And Marceline Archivist, reluctant heroine, would be there, ever ready to safeguard the precarious balance they all called home.